كلا.
Welcome to our podcast, where we talk about the interesting, frustrating, and inspiring experiences we have as people with strongly held religious views working in corporate IT. We're not here to preach or teach you our religion. We're here to explore ways we make our career as IT professionals mesh, or at least not conflict, with our religious life. This is Technically Religious. Did you ever wonder why IT diagrams always use a cloud to show an element where stuff goes in and comes out, but we're not 100% sure what happens inside? That was originally called a TAMO Cloud, which stood for Then a Miracle Occurred. It indicated an area of tech that was inscrutable, but nevertheless something we saw as reliable and consistent in its output. For IT pros who hold a strong religious, ethical, or moral point of view, our journey has had its own sort of TAMO Cloud, where grounded technology and lofty philosophical ideals blend in ways that can be anything from challenging to uplifting to humbling. In this series, we sit down with members of the IT community to explore their journeys, both technical and theological, and see what lessons we can glean from where they've been, where they are today, and where they see themselves in the future. My name is Leon Adato, and the other voice you'll hear on this episode is longtime Technically Religious contributor Keith Townsend.
How's it going?
It is going great. It is so good to have you back on the podcast this year. Before we dive into any of these conversations, I've been waiting to have this one with you for a long time. I want to give you a moment of shameless self-promotion where you can talk about anything and everything that is particularly Keith and CTO advisor and stuff like that. So where can people find you? What are you doing these days? All that stuff.
All right, so you can find me easiest way. You know what? There's a new website that we did this year, so let's hawk that. thectoadvisor.com has been completely revamped. It's a completely new platform and scope. We're pretty proud of the work there.
Awesome. So we'll check that out. Fine. And how about on the Twitters?
On the Twitters, because you know
horrify your daughter.
My daughter loves that. It's at CTO Advisor.
Perfect. Anything else that you want us to pay attention to, where people can find you and what you're working on?
Well, what I'm working on is, we've been in the throes of COVID. Just before you hit the big red button, we talked about just the impact of looking for the vaccine. What we're looking for at the CTO Advisor is looking beyond that. We're going to do a road trip in which we're going to hit 12 cities over a 3-month period. Me and Melissa driving around the big Ford pickup, pulling a Airstream and talking to people who listen to this podcast. So people in technology and technology vendors. We're going to have a good time over the 3 months. So keep checking the website, check the Twitter feed for our travels.
Fantastic. Okay. And the last thing is just briefly your religious, ethical, or moral point of view.
So, this is a big question mark for a lot of people, but I think I have it down pat. I'm non-denominational.
Mm-hmm.
However, I'm from a branch of the the Churches of Christ. So if you're a Christian and you think of the Churches of Christ as a denomination, that's where I'm at.
Fantastic. Okay, and if you're scribbling any of the websites or stuff down, this is just a reminder to keep your hand on the wheel, pay attention to the road, don't worry about it. There's going to be show notes that come out the day after this podcast drops. So anything that Keith and I are talking about here is going to be written down there for you. You do not need to make notes. With that said, I want to start off with the technical side. So CTO Advisor, doing road trips, like what does your day-to-day technical life look like?
Wow, you know what? I was just sharing with my wife, Melissa, that has become a lot more blurry. So I can identify religion really easy compared to what I do technically anymore, because I spend so much time as a business owner on the administrative parts of the business. When I'm not spending time on the administrative parts of the business, selling product, creating product, etc., I'm doing analyst work. So I get briefed, I disseminate that information from technical folks, I create content around that and help decision makers make decisions around purchases, and occasionally I'll take the advisory role and advise a company on their hybrid infrastructure journey.
Got it. And I know that you do a lot with, basically in the cloud space. You have a couple of opinions about Kubernetes. You may even dabble in building data centers for yourself for fun.
For fun or for profit, yes. I do. I have the CTO advisor hybrid infrastructure, which is, this whole Kubernetes thing and all of the journeys. When we talk about moving from private data center to public cloud, very abstract terms. The CTO advisor hybrid infrastructure is a concrete something I can put my finger on and say this is what their journey from private data center to hybrid infrastructure looks like. This is what it tastes like. This is what it feels like. Here's the pain points, the gotchas. So we built a data center with the intent of showing the journey from private data center to hybrid infrastructure.
Very cool. And nice that you have a visceral sense of what that looks like and you can convey that. That's really cool. Okay. So I'm going to presume that you were not born with a silver keyboard in your mouth, that you were not, that upon your birth, your mother didn't look at you and say, yes, let's call him CTO advisor. That's what we'll do. Where did you start off in tech? What was your rough beginnings?
So rough beginnings, the old man, as we like to call them, bought me a color computer 2, a TRS-80 color computer 2. For those of you that were born after the year 2000, this is a machine from. I bought a car from somebody that was born in 2000 last night, so that was a really interesting experience.
Wow!
But in 1984, 1983, my dad bought me a color computer 2. Leon, we're both of an age group that we remember War Games, the greatest geek movie of all times.
Possibly,
and
yes.
I had in my mind, you know what, I'm going to go play tic-tac-toe on the color computer. And that started my love for technology, and then you forward through the hobbyist phase to when I actually started to get involved in tech. It was post my initial career in hospitality. I always had the bug for tech, and I got a job pre-year 2K if you had a pulse and could spell Windows, you could get a job in technology. I parlayed that into a job working the help desk for a commodities data provider, commodities trading data provider. For the third ship. That's way back in 1997, I think. So that's the start. Just supporting commodity traders trying to get real-time data feeds off of our product. So that was a really interesting experience. Trying to explain to somebody with an Indian accent what a tilde was.
What a tilde, yeah. Yes. What does that exactly look
like?
What
is a tilde?
And also on their keyboard, where would you find it? Possibly nowhere.
Yeah.
And I've commented a few times on this show that help desk is, for many of us, one of the formative experiences that we have that either show us that we never ever want to work in tech ever again, or that there is so much richness and so much to learn and so many different directions to go in that we just can't ever get away from it. All right, so then the next question is, started off post TRS color to TRS-80, post that into the help desk. How did you get from there to where you are today? What was that progression like?
Wow, that's a really great story or question, and it was a lot of just excellent people throughout my career and grit. The great thing about starting out and learning about technology, if you have a passion for it, this is one of those industries you can make a really great living for your family and not have a degree. At the time, I did not have a degree in computing. I didn't even have a degree. I only had maybe 6 months of community college under my belt from going to community college for 2 years. I probably only had 6 months of credit. So that third shift job, I grabbed a MCSE. It's been so long.
MCSE.
MCSE,
I have to say it really fast to
certification guide, and I went down the journey of consuming every bit of information I can around certification. I'm super proud that I took the Windows 95 certification test, which was way harder than the Windows NT 4.0 test. And I got like a 98% on it. And I was super geeked because I studied for it for months. But, I used that certification path as a way to elevate myself into my next career opportunity, which was, again, working the help desk. But this time at the Chicago Tribune, making 20 grand more a year. The again, that self-study route, mentors, etc., moved into network administration. Not even a year after taking the job at the Tribune, still at the Tribune, moved from that to I started this brand called Townsend Consulting, still part of my email address. I can't, but I was super naive, as many 20-something-year-olds are at the time, thinking that I knew enough to actually advise and consult people on how to deploy Windows technologies. I guess I was as knowledgeable as anyone. Took a hard turn in my career. Actually, personally, I had to file bankruptcy because it was a very, very bad career move. I should have stuck with full-time employment, but this is around 9/11. So I spent, I think, about 6 or 7 months unemployed because I made the wrong turn in my career. We recouped, spent a bit of time in a mid-sized organization doing, again, network administration work. Did a lot of really cool projects like deploying a backup system, deploying my first SAN, storage area network, just cutting the next 5 or 6 years, just really earning my stripes in IT. Around the 10, 11-year point of my career, I finally finished my degree in computing, a BA in computing from DePaul University. We moved to Maryland because we were in yet another recession. This is around 2008, 2009.
Right.
We moved to Maryland, where I took a job at Lockheed Martin, which completely changed my career telemetry. I went from very engineer focused. This is, if people have ever followed me throughout my career, I was a virtualized geek back then. I moved from being kind of an engineer to an architect, a lot more customer facing roles and opportunities, managing projects. I finished up my master's in IT project management. That opened the door for me to move to PwC, where I became the CTO advisor. The conversations changed from should I, use iSCSI versus NFS versus Fiber Channel to, what, should we outsource all of IT? So that's where, I stepped away from the keyboard. This is circa 2012, 14. And ever since, I've been kind of, that's been the brand and the focus of my career. Not necessarily, I'm a management consultant. Not necessarily. I am a management consultant necessarily, but I'm a management consultant with deep technical chops. So I can talk, everything from file systems to storage technology and other storage technologies to eBGP, all the way to should we use OpEx versus CapEx for a purchasing decision. That's how I landed here.
Got it. That is so. What's wonderful about that narrative is that I think a lot of people who've been in IT for a while can say, "Oh, I can see myself in that journey." Again, a lot of us have gotten our start in or near the help desk. A lot of us have made several, career or company changes, which led to career changes or at least technical pivots in what we did. So it's really nice to hear that story validated in your experiences. That there is a pattern to it. So many people come to IT from so many different directions that sometimes you feel like, it doesn't matter what you do. It's, who knows where it's going to end up. No, there really is there really is sort of a path to it, even though it may not be as formalized as, say, a trade or, one of the, we'll say the higher, how do I want to say this? One of the more traditional degreed paths, like, being a physician or a lawyer or whatever. Okay, so that covers the technical side of it. I want to flip over to the religious side, and I always like to make the caveat that labels are challenging in a lot of cases. You said that you had a very easy time sort of identifying yourself, but I know that a lot of folks, when I say, what are you, they're like, well, I'm kind of this, but not that part of it. One person on a earlier show identified themselves as a kicking and screaming Christian. So, stuff like that. So I want to start off by saying, how do you identify religiously today? Tell us a little bit more about where you place yourself religiously today.
So, it's really interesting because I think when most people, for those of you who can't physically see me or have never physically seen me and can't tell by my voice because voices are hard, I'm an African American. And when most people think of African American Christians, I think they have this image in their head of Baptist, traditional, soulful worship type of church. I go to a multinational. I'm in a multinational congregation and community. So there's a bit of everything. So you can kind of think of it as a little bit more reserved, which has some really interesting I think impacts, because traditionally I think you would think of the Churches of Christ as more of a evangelistical movement. So when you think of the evangelistical movement, you think of the politics around that today. And I'm very much not of the politics of the evangelistical movement. And that creates some really interesting conflicts within our within our multinational, multiracial community, because you have a lot of that culture mixed with a whole lot of black folk. So if for those who need a point of reference, think of the traditional evangelistical doctrine, but mixed with a lot of a multiracial congregation, and you get the complexities and the flavor of that bubbling up.
Yeah, it's never as simple as, I think, the media or a quick 3 inches of a New York Times article wants to make it sound. There's always nuances. There's always people are complicated, and they bring themselves to everything that they do. So it's never a simple thing. So that is interesting. And again, as I said with the tech, you probably weren't born as a multinational, multicultural Church of Christ evangelical, but not that kind of Christian. So where did you start off? What was your home life? What was your home religious life like growing up?
So the one day, if my mother was in tech, she'd make an amazing guest, because she kind of covers the spectrum. My mom specifically, my father was not religious much of all. He has Christian, like many Christians or like many religions. If you're culturally a Christian, you identify as Christian, but you're not really practicing. So my father was a non-practicing Christian, just but my mom, when I was in junior high, basically, became a Jehovah's Witness. And my mom is now a Muslim. So that has been quite the journey, and it's always an interesting conversation with her. And we'll get into that, I think, in another podcast or another date. But it's an amazing conversation, but which has made my Christian journey, my religious journey, really interesting. What is common between if Jehovah's Witnesses were political at all, I think their politics would probably lean towards what the evangelistical churches will, but more importantly, culturally, they're very similar. faiths might be doctrine may be slightly different, but
Sure.
culturally they're very, very similar. So I'm finding that a lot of what I remember in my childhood as worship and as meeting and community is very similar in my religious experience today.
Got it. Okay. So yeah, so the feeling of it was the same, even if the particulars of the expression of it may have been slightly different. So that's
Yes.
okay, very cool. And so having grown up in a Jehovah's Witness house, even though your mom herself went through her own religious journey, what was yours like from that to this to where you are today?
So what's really interesting is that I wholeheartedly believed in the Jehovah's Witnesses doctrine when as a teen, as a uh, fairly young adult, when my mother faith changed. So that mine's didn't change to the extreme that my mother's did, where she went with a completely different lineage of faith.
Uh-huh.
Mine's changed in the fact that it wasn't as strong as I thought it was. I was sound in the beliefs of Christianity. I don't think has changed.
Mm-hmm.
What had changed was whether or not I was a practicing Christian or not, and that I was not. So in my early 20s, from my post high school to my early 20s, right before I started my career in technology, I was not a practicing Christian. My life did not meet up to what my religious beliefs were. So, you're Jewish and you're Orthodox Jewish. So some of this stuff we can easily relate to because I think, Orthodox Judaism may be one of the most disciplined faiths you can go down. And when you come from a Jehovah's Witness background, it's a very disciplined faith.
Mm-hmm.
So there's strict beliefs around things like sexual immorality. So the fact that me and Melissa, who I've been with since I was 20,
Mm-hmm.
that we were living together and not married bothered me from a faith perspective.
Got it.
So I didn't reconcile that until I started to study the Bible again with the Churches of Christ and become a baptized Christian around age 25
Mm-hmm.
or so. And that kind of got me from, kind of Jehovah's Witness, on the verge of becoming a Jehovah's Witness, to kind of stepping away from Christianity to re-engaging in the faith in general. And then, I eventually morphed into, as you think through kind of the entire journey from age 25 to I'm now 47. So a 22-year Christian journey. It went from being that fiery early Christian, going out and preaching on the street corners, to having teenage children and trying to help them with their own religious journeys and understanding life just isn't as black and white as we all would like to think.
Right.
So it's an amazing, like, if once you start to peel apart the details of it, and we'll talk about, I think, some of it
Mm-hmm.
in some of your next questions, but things about my faith around taboo topics such as sexual orientation. Like, once you become a full realized adult and you have queer friends, how do you reconcile having queer friends, but your faith is saying that the doctrine of your faith is saying that this is something not acceptable? So
Right.
separating the two or reconciling the two has been just a really interesting journey as I've matured.
Yeah, and friends or relatives,
Yeah.
to that matter.
I have a niece
And
that I love to death, and she's engaged to another woman. So, we had them over to dinner before COVID. We had them over to dinner, and we had a great time. But it's some really tough questions that you end up
right,
just dabbling with.
right. And if you're reconciled to it, to those things, to those contradictions, which I think I think the tension, the religious and holy tension, I think is where the excitement is, the work, the introspection, the again, as an adult, as a fully realized, mature adult, and I recognize that as I say this, if my wife or children listen to this podcast, they will laugh hysterically at my believing myself to be a fully realized, mature adult. But that aside, I think that figuring out those things about what what I believe and what I practice, and how I reconcile what my both what my religious peers, my co-religionists, are saying, and all those things. That's where a lot of the really interesting dialogue can be found. I don't mean arguments, but I mean real dialogue.
Mm-hmm.
Like, what do we mean when we say this? And I will say that, as IT people, I'm not trying to diminish it, but as IT people, I think we're used to those hard conversations, those challenging conversations of, no, I really think this is the way we need to fix this, or this is the way we need to build this. No, that's not it. I think this is how we need to build it based on my experiences or my understanding of the facts on the ground. And I think that that's part of the thing that makes folks with strong religious identities who work in IT. I think that's where we find those overlaps, and that sort of takes us to the next part of the episode, which is when, as a person with a strong religious, ethical, or moral point of view who works in IT, I'm curious about how those two things overlap. Has it created any friction, and how have you overcome that? But also, have there been any, wonderful discoveries, delightful discoveries, I like to call them, where you didn't think that being religious was going to help your tech, or you didn't think that being technical was going to enhance your experience of your faith, and yet it happened. So we'll start off with the not so great stuff, and we'll end on a high note. So have there ever been moments when your faith caused friction with your tech, or vice versa?
So that's a really interesting question. I think, and this is not just, I think, unique to tech. I think the sciences, there's two areas. There's kind of work-life balance, that category that we put in work-life balance. And tech is unique in the sense that we don't ask our payroll people to run payroll at 10 o'clock at night.
Usually.
Not
unless something's gone really wrong.
But when people are looking at me funny, and you don't have this problem because of your faith, but you have the conflict. When people are looking at me funny because I step out of service because I got a text, is weird. That was early on. Like, oh, I got the servers down on a Sunday afternoon, and I'm doing service. I think Orthodox Jews kind of get this part right. You know what? You won't get that text because you don't have a pager on. So that's one aspect of it. But there's the second part of that, which is the work-life balance. It's when you need to push back from that. The computers don't care that you go to service Wednesday nights and on Sundays. So I remember very vividly one night I was getting off of work at 5 o'clock, and I get a page right before I leave, and the former CEO of the Tribune is now running the back then once you became the former CEO of the Tribune, once you retired from that, you became the CEO of Tribune's charity, whatever that was named.
Okay.
And they had a problem, and it was my job to troubleshoot that problem. So there's this super important person in the organization. I'm working the help desk. I'm on call. I get a page that this senior executive has a problem, but I have church service, and that mentally, in my mind, I cannot miss church service. So I have this conflict. Do I go help the executive, or do I go to church? In which, so for me, it was really a question of faith. And I chose to go to service, and this is just a good piece of advice for work-life balance in general. I always push against deadlines that conflict with my personal life.
Uh-huh.
I've done enough stuff to know that most deadlines are artificial.
Uh-huh.
Someone somewhere said that this has to be done by a date. Unless we're talking about, VMworld is scheduled on the 19th of September, and this presentation will be delivered, and it has to be in by the morning of 19th of September, then everything else is negotiable. If it's not a written, and even then, we get these weird deadlines in IT and in business in general. Thou shalt have your presentation in a month before the thing, and I kind of just brush all that stuff off. I try to respect it if I can, but if I have conflict, I manage that conflict. The second thing is, by definition, and I'm sure people who listen to this podcast struggle with this. When I read the Old Testament and I see that Joshua prayed and the sun stopped in the middle of the sky, I simply don't believe it. Like, and you can kind of water over your faith if you want to and say, I'm just being unfaithful, and yes, I will believe this thing that I don't believe. I try to be as honest as possible when my semi-scientist technical brain can't reconcile something that I read in my religious text. I don't cover it up. Like, I don't believe Adam and Eve. I don't believe I'm a Christian, but I don't believe the creation story as written in the text that we read today. And those are the things that I truly struggle with. I don't struggle with, I'm a mature adult. I have plenty of years of experience. I know how to push back on areas of conflict when it comes to scheduling. But even as a 22 year old Christian, 22 years in my faith, I still struggle with reconciling what my technical brain tells me and what my faith what my faith teaches.
Right. And that is actually a topic that we're going to cover in a future episode, which is this idea of proof and how do we reconcile our, fact-based, don't go with your gut, say it with data or don't say it at all kind of 9-to-5 lives with our, biblically founded ideas of how the world works and how it's structured and things like that. At the same time, so I want to just highlight the idea that, deadlines are artificial. If you're on call, the challenge, I think, again, as another religious person, the challenge isn't reconciling your faith with on-call. It's reconciling your organization with on-call that is being done by a human. Because, you had church service. You could just as easily have had bath time with the kids. I'm sorry, I'm elbow deep in a bathtub with a 2-year-old. I'm not turning around to go fix the server right now. It's going to wait another 10 minutes or 15 or whatever it is. I have family emergencies. I have all those things. How does an organization handle the fact that on-call is a point of, if the emergency is so bad that my not responding to it in the first 15 or 20 minutes caused it all to die, all to go away, then there were some pretty fundamental problems with the system that had nothing to do with my failing on call.
Yeah, you have to be able to triage. You have to be able to say, you know what, is this really, I know I got a page for it, but is this really important? Because both of us have older children. Mine are a bit older than yours, but there are times where I just simply can't get back. And I think back, wow, was getting that CRM system up in 2 hours versus 6 really worth missing that game?
Right.
Retrospect, maybe not.
Yeah. And I will say, I am absolutely a workaholic. At this point in my life, I'm 53. I've been in IT for 30 years. There is no getting around it, and there's probably no solving it. I enjoy my work so much that it is very hard for me to walk away from it. At the same time, I've had some very hard conversations with my family who said, of course you worked 12 hours to get that thing done and you got the kudos. All we got was not having you. That's all we
Mm.
got out of it. And that, again, this is apropos of nothing that we're talking about in terms of tech or religion. It's just one of those life lessons that, old tech dudes, are sharing. But you really have to think, not only is the applause you're going to get from your company fleeting, are you going to get an attaboy and that's it? Ain't worth it. Ain't worth dropping date night with your wife or your significant other. Isn't worth, it's not worth dropping it for, oh, wow, that was really good. Thank you. It's not worth being asked to do it again. It's not worth thinking you will always be there. And it's also not necessarily worth the frustration and the anger that you may see long term in your family's faces when they start to hate your job.
Yeah, the I love it that my kids have memories of jobs that I had that they loved. They were like, "Oh, I love that job that you would take me to," and they don't know
Ah,
what I did, but they say, "Oh, I love that job that you did," and there was the refrigerator full of soda, and I could get free soda, and we stop in, and then we go, and then afterwards we go across the street to, one of my favorite stories is recently my son said he took his girlfriend to the restaurant that was across the street from that job. And
uh-huh.
he said he was so disappointed and heartbroken when his girlfriend just said, "Oh, it was okay." And he said, "I have some of my best memories of being with my dad and my family after he, take us to work after he did a server upgrade or whatever. He'd take us across the street and have this place." And then he said the other day, "Oh, and to boot is now closed." And so there's this thing that you have to balance. We have tough jobs in
Yeah.
information technology, and as and most faiths have this thing, and I think it's pretty consistent that pride is a sin. And
Hmm.
there's no better job than being a IT X that feeds your pride
Yes.
than what we do. The ability to be the superhero, the person who saved the day. I had a CEO tell me, "Keith, you took us out of the Stone Age, etc." We get all the kudos in the world, and it feeds that
Right.
pride. And at the end of
Right.
the day, we have to ask the question, and we'll get into this in one of your next series of questions around. You know what? Pride is a horrible thing for both your career and your personal life.
Yeah, I'm not gonna quote her correctly, but Charity Majors, I think she's still the CTO of Honeycomb IO. She is still part of Honeycomb, but she has gone from, I think, the CTO to one of the engineers or back again. She founded the company, but she gets to have whatever job she wants in it. And she said she's very much anti firefighting. She said, "I actually do not give anybody credit in our company for fixing a problem that blew up. I want to give credit to the person who found the problem before it occurred, who did the steady, regular testing and quality control so that the problem never occurred." And I think IT is horrible at that as a industry where we lionize the 2 a.m. firefighter while completely overlooking the person who shows up at 9, leaves at 5, does good, solid, reliable work that is consistent and has few, if any, flaws. That person never gets a bonus. That person, I mean, in terms of like when we think about, bonuses for saving the day, that person never gets it because, yeah, they just showed up. They just did their job. Yeah, they just did their job. Perfect, consistently, all the time. That's the part that we should be holding up as the example. But we don't. So you're absolutely right. And I actually made a note that we definitely need to do an episode on Pride Goeth before the fall, for sure, to talk about like what that means in tech and religion. Okay, so we've talked about some of the challenges. Are there any moments, as I said before, there's delightful discoveries? Any times when you realize that your faith was really a asset, a benefit to your technical life, or vice versa, where you were at church and you realized that being an IT person was really, and not just, I'm going to go back to an earlier episode we had where it's like, oh, Keith can fix it. Keith's the AV guy, not the, again, that lionizing, the problem solving. But anytime when you realize that your technical mindset created a deeper or more powerful connection to your faith.
So let's talk about how the faith has impacted my work life and as a technologist. You know what? We'll talk about it, I think, in a future episode, and we'll address the proof piece of it. But sometimes some things just take faith. True story. I was on call, and there was the help desk reporting system was running on an NT 4.0 server when NT 4.0 was the latest OS from Microsoft out and available,
Right.
but it was still then a horrible OS. And I was in there to
Right.
do updates that you got in via CD back in that time. And I came to it, hit the KVM. It was blue screened already. Like even before I touched anything, it was blue screened. Hours later, this has been a system that had been giving us problems. I called the director. He said, "Look, Keith, if this thing isn't up by the time we get back into the office in the morning, we both might as well go out looking for new jobs." So I'm like, whoa, hold on. I was just coming in to do updates. So how did I get, lumped into this whole losing your job thing? It got to the point, it had to be about 3 o'clock in the morning. I literally got on the middle of the data center floor. I got on my knees and prayed because I had no idea how, you guys have to remember this. This is 1998, 1999. There is no internet blogs that you can just go to Google or Alta Vista and Google and find the
Right.
solution to the problem. If you get on the phone with Microsoft, you're going to be on the phone for hours before you
Yeah.
even get to someone who can help you.
Help you through it. Mm-hmm.
So my only main line, my Google was just praying. And I got some crazy idea to do it. So I've never shied away from my faith in my job, and I've taken principles from my Christian faith and applied them to my approach to work. I'm ethical, I'm moral, and I'm a better leader because I embrace the love of Christ in my approach to my job. I literally do not approach my job as I'm working for the Tribune or Lockheed Martin. I'm working for God, and is my work acceptable? Is it something that I can present to him? Is my leadership something that I can present to him? Is it something if am I taking credit where I don't deserve to take credit? That's how I approach my work because of my faith. And people give me kudos about it all the time, and I don't always succeed in doing this, but I am who I am because of my faith. You take away my faith from who I am as a person, and I'm pretty unlikable.
Got it. Yeah, it definitely is a mitigating factor for a lot of us. I will say also, just having known you for a while and worked with you in several different venues, that you bring that perspective to, is it worth doing? And you'll look at projects that I think a lot of folks in your position would say, no, that's not worth it. And you say, no. There's a message here that I want to deliver. There's a conversation I want to have that's worth being part of, or whatever. You value things in a way that is not necessarily business like or business centric, but it is humanity centric, and it is really about what can I do to help in a lot of ways.
Yeah, I remember what it was like to. So my brother is also a business owner. My youngest brother is a business owner. He had a employee he was thinking that, you know what, I think I might be overpaying this particular employee. No, not overpaying. He said, I think I might be underpaying this particular employee. I really need to consider this. And in a casual conversation a week later, the employee said, you know what, I was at the grocery store with my wife, and it was the first time in our lives, and this person is over 40. This is the first time in our lives where we went into the grocery store and we weren't worried about our checking account balance and what we were buying for and being able to buy groceries. So IT technology has transformed my life from just a privileged perspective. My wife got tagged in a photo with a billionaire. We're not rich, but we have access and privilege that the 12, 16-year-old Keith could never even fathom. I just did not know this world existed. So whether it's your day job or you personally or someone comes with an opportunity for me to open that door to other people to have similar transformative experiences, why would I want to pull that ladder up from them and not give them the same opportunities? As I mentioned, it was grit partially that got me here, but it was also people willing to extend a hand and help me up that ladder.
Very nice. Keith, it is always a privilege and a pleasure to talk to you. This is the lightning round. Any final thoughts, anything that you want to share with folks just to think about on their way?
So, you know what? I think if you can take anything from this conversation, don't be fearful of your faith. People are people. Some of them, there are truly jerks out there. One of our fellow contributors got challenged because of his faith on Twitter. But overall, you impact way more people positively by sharing your faith, whatever that faith is. I'm not in a position to judge how you choose your relationship with your God or your spiritual being. But what I am saying, the positivity from that will positively impact your career and others way more than the pain, for the most part, inflicted upon us because we're open with our faith.
Right. The benefits outweigh any of the challenges, and sometimes the challenges are there to be overcome.
Yes.
I like it. Fantastic. Okay, one more time for people who want to find you online, who want to see what you're working on. Where can people get in touch with you?
So at CTO Advisor is the easiest way to get in contact with me. DMs are open, but don't send me anything weird because I will block you. And thectoadvisor.com is how you get to me professionally. And I post a lot of stuff to LinkedIn because it's a very powerful platform.
Yeah, you have a lot of nice talks on there too that I've noticed from time to time. You give it's almost like a mini podcast there. So that's another thing to check out is that LinkedIn link. Well, thank you again for taking some time out of your day. It's actually the middle of the day for both of us, and I look forward to seeing you back on the show.
All right, Leon. Hopefully I'll see you in person when I visit you via the road show. When I visit Cleveland via the road show.
If the road show's coming to Cleveland, then we are absolutely going to do a tour of every kosher restaurant. I will weigh 900 pounds when we're done with it.
I love me a kosher hot dog.
Perfect. We'll get you one. Take care.
Take care.
Thank you for making time for us this week. To hear more of Technically Religious, visit our website at technicallyreligious.com, where you can find our other episodes, leave us ideas for future discussions, or connect with us on social media.